another region.
Mr. Ringelberg, you wanted to talk on this issue from the local agencies of the North Delta?
What an august panel here. These are the folks who are actually doing things on the ground we keep talking about wanting to do. And so my thanks to each and every one of you for the hard work and funding and moving the regulatory process forward and putting the pieces together. I want to talk about two things. One, briefly, Randy brought up the streamlining process. There's two really simple ways of streamlining. We heard a little bit about that in terms of the Corps. There's a regional general permit process that the Corps has available to them. I've worked on several of them. We're developing one now for Poudre Creek. You can package together like impacts and have it all managed under a regional general permit. Much more efficient than nationwide permit. Certainly cheaper than an individual permit has been. Within that, you can also have Cal Fish and Game, soon to be DFW, the Regional Water Quality Control Board, all with their general permit processes linked together. So there is a way to streamline this if we choose. It's going to take a lot of work. It's not simple. But on a regional basis where we're looking at one geographic area with one set of problems with one kind of limited set of impacts, it's actually something that's directly applicable here. So I've asked the Delta Conservancy if they would look at doing a program EIR. They're statutorily linked into this. They have requirements under the law for them to execute this. What could be better than to have one program EIR that allows us to do restoration, similar sorts of impacts, very consistent with CEQA, that at worst we have to tear off of underneath. And so there are a lot of opportunities for sequencing and programming and getting the regulatory side streamlined instead of this piecemeal approach which clobbers us. And I'm a restoration practitioner myself. 10% of my budget goes to permit process where I go meet with the same people and describe the same project impacts and do the same documentation, go through the same process. A year is a fast process. And so I want to get to sort of the enemy is us part of this, which is earlier today you heard that for a linear mile of levee restoration, the new cost was approximately $300,000 to the design plans. $300,000 is a tremendous amount of money on the permit side. So when we complain about how much money it costs on the permit side, you've now doubled my permit cost. Okay. And none of my clients really want to pay the $300,000 on the front end, and they sure as heck don't want to pay the $600,000 now for yet another process that's supposed to help move them forward. And so I would like us to really spend a little bit of time looking at the financial impacts of these. If the cost of making these adjustments in terms of analysis.
What adjustments?
Sure. So when someone comes to you with a plan for consistency, they have to analyze whether or not it's consistent with the plan. That's kind of a fixed cost. It's going to take people like Phil to analyze that. But then when the consultants, like myself, have to come in and go, okay, is it possible to do a setback levy here? And what are the criteria for that? And they're not defined, so I get to define those myself. And are they reasonable? And I have to pull my team of 6 specialists together and define that. That's a new cost for every project. And so I think the analysis that you were provided today was accurate, that there's between a 200% and an 800% increase in the total cost package with the proposal that we're seeing here. Now, that's a lot of money. And it's not just a lot of money because we understand that we have to maintain, sorry, I'll use my hands a lot. We have to maintain consistency. That we understand that. But when your cost goes up 200% to 800%, that's every mile less that we get to do on the ground, either less restoration or less levee maintenance. So I want you to understand that.
But if you're not protecting interests that have deliberately placed themselves in a flood-prone area, you could avoid the spending of this money.
Oh, sure. I mean, we could just declare the Delta as a no-rescue zone.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, that is a possibility, but that is not what you're recommending.
No. What I'm looking at is...
So what you're saying is you'd rather pass the cost on to someone else other than the reclamation or the clients you represent?
No, absolutely not. It's a much finer point than that. The process that you are describing, that you had a person speak to this morning about the cost on the basis of the DSC review process will double to 8 times the cost of the project. Okay. So that's not a cost that I'm not trying to transfer on to my clients. That's a cost we all have to pay. for every one of those projects. That's the time that you folks have to spend here. That's the Stewardship Council's staff time. That's the lost economic costs that we talked about earlier. And then when I find that it is consistent, then I have to then change all the plans, fine. But we're ending up, this is a cycle of analysis for the sake of analysis, and then cost for the sake of cost that keeps us from getting to what we're trying to talk about here, which is near-term solutions for the Delta that are consistent with the Delta plan.
So what you're saying is the law should be repealed that required the Delta plan to be developed and state and local agencies to be consistent with it?
Absolutely not. I think it was very specific. You had a cost analysis today that identified the significant increase in costs, not because of the
mostly
costs.
Attributable to increased flood protection to protect the existing residents where they exist, property owners where they exist.
No, cost due to increased analysis because of the Stewardship Council's policy.
Not true. That is not. You do misread that section.
Well, I respectfully disagree.
Okay.
The fact that the cost analysis was used in illustration for levies, you're absolutely correct. But the cost applies to anything that's a covered action, not just levies.
That's true.
That's my point.
Yeah, that's the law, right. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.